Hello there, young scholar. Yes, you've searched the ancient libraries and the tombs of the pharaohs and sought the advice of wise men, and yet you still come to me seeking my counsel to get the answer to an age-old mystery. Should you buy small pro phone or big pro phone? Listen, you're the one that clicked on this stupid video, so I'm gonna give you an answer whether you should buy the iPhone 16 Pro or the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and the real differences between these phones. The first thing we have to talk about is the price and the different options between both of these phones. So the iPhone 16 Pro starts at $1,000 for 128 gigabytes of storage, while the iPhone 16 Pro Max starts at $1,200, $200 more than the iPhone 16 Pro. Now, that's not just because of the bigger display, that's because the Pro Max model does not have a 128 gigabyte option. Instead, this phone starts at just 256 gigabytes of storage, which is the main reason for that price jump. In fact, if you buy a 256 gigabyte version of the regular Pro model, you'll see that there's only a $100 difference between both phones. However, I know that the base model is a popular model for a lot of users that want the Pro option, and even though 128 gigabytes of storage might not be enough for me, it is fine for the vast majority of people out there, especially if you have cloud storage. And while an extra $200 may not sound like a lot when you're already spending $1,000 on a phone, it is a 20% increase in price. And yeah, $1,200 on a smartphone, that might just be too big of an ask for most people. That's especially true this year when you look at the iPhone 16 Pro and the Pro Max and realize that they both have the same exact feature set. Yes, this year there are no exclusive features on the Pro Max model like there have been in past years. For example, the iPhone 15 Pro Max came with a exclusive 5x telephoto lens, while the smaller 15 Pro only came with a 3x telephoto lens. This year, both phones come with that 5x lens and the same camera system, so photos and videos on both of these devices will look exactly the same. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't other differences though, and that does come down to size and weight. The iPhone 16 Pro weighs even more than the 15 Pro from last year. This time it weighs 199 grams. The iPhone 16 Pro Max is even heavier this time, weighing in at 227 grams. And even though this is a small weight difference between last year's models, both phones do feel slightly more dense. At times this can be a benefit because psychologically, when you pick up a densely weighted object, your brain associates that with a premium feeling. And I know that sounds silly as someone that likes a lighter weight phone, but picking up both of these phones, well, they do feel really premium. Or that could just be the placebo effect from having a phone with really shiny gold sides. This desert titanium color is making me feel like a pharaoh from ancient Egypt. Now, you don't have to be Robert Oppenheimer to know that the main difference between the iPhone 16 Pro and the Pro Max is the size of these phones, and both Pro phones are bigger than their previous 15 Pro models.
Until somebody builds a bigger one.
The 16 Pro now has a 6.3-inch display, while the 16 Pro Max now gets a massive 6.9-inch display. And while 0.2 inches may not sound like a huge display jump, it changes the feel of how you use both Pro models. First, I want to start with the 6.9-inch Pro Max because I want to say something nice about it before I insult it. And the nice thing I'll say about this phone is that the display is gorgeous. Every time I look at that big 6.9-inch display with those really small bezels, I feel super immersed. And I appreciate the extra screen real estate the most over the smaller 6.3-inch Pro when I'm viewing photos or watching videos. Everything looks gorgeous on that big OLED display. There's also a few practical benefits, like touch controls and apps feel a little bit more spaced out, and you can read a few extra lines in most apps without needing to scroll. For the 6.3-inch iPhone 16 Pro, I feel like this phone is the perfect middle ground between the old Pro and old Pro Max size. I'm tempted to call it a iPhone 16 Pro Max Mini because that's what it feels like in my usage. You get a little bit of that extra screen real estate without it feeling like it's too much, but it's definitely noticeable. And sure, you don't need me to tell you that, yeah, just like the Pro Max, a bigger display is going to be a little bit better for watching videos or viewing photos or even reading on this device. However, that little extra display makes a big difference in other areas that you may not realize. The keyboard, for instance, on the 6.3-inch size iPhone 16 Pro feels perfect. I love typing on this device. The keys are spaced out well and big enough that I make less mistakes, but it's also much easier to type one-handed on this device compared to the Pro Max. And that's where the major downside for the Pro Max comes in. The size is cumbersome. The 6.9-inch model is just verging on being too big, and yeah, I can personally feel its increase in size over my old 15 Pro Max. It is really hard to use this phone one-handed, and forget about reaching the top of the display with your thumb. It's hard to reach the middle display from the bottom of the phone. For a lot of tasks, I really do need to use this phone with two hands. The other thing I noticed too is that using the new camera control button on the regular size 16 Pro is much more comfortable compared to the 16 Pro Max. Using the camera button to switch between the camera settings or sliding your finger to adjust the zoom, it just feels a lot easier to do on the smaller 16 Pro, whereas on the Pro Max, it feels more fiddly and more cumbersome to do one-handed because I'm also fighting with the size and weight of the phone, and especially when I'm holding it one-handed like this, it's more top heavy, so it feels like it's always trying to lean forward. The one plus I'll give to having the camera button on the Pro Max is that it does make taking pictures easier with one hand with such a big phone when using it in the vertical orientation. But all the scrolling and gestures with that button are a pain. Now there is one other major difference between these phones, and that is battery life. And that really all comes down to physics. That's going back to our Robert Oppenheimer reference. The iPhone 16 Pro Max has a bigger battery inside of it, and Apple claims that it has the longest battery life on an iPhone ever.
Until somebody builds a bigger one.
But around how much longer is that Pro Max battery going to last you through an actual day of usage? Well, I don't really like battery tests because there's so many variables that can affect battery life. Like even poor cellular reception can drain your battery faster than normal. And personally, I never see the battery life results that these artificial battery life tests claim that you can get. Still, I did some research because I know viewers like you like numbers, and they're easy to understand. I get that fully. In the Tech Chops battery test video, he saw that the iPhone 16 Pro lasted for 9 hours and 6 minutes, while the Pro Max ran for 11 hours and 29 minutes. That's 2 hours more of additional battery life. In the bloody Mr. Who's the Boss battery test video, the 16 Pro lasted about 8 hours and 19 minutes, while the Pro Max lasted about 11 hours and 22 minutes. That's about a 3-hour difference in battery life. And that's huge. That's crazy. That's insane. Well, now, based on my own non-scientific short testing of these phones, which again isn't fully accurate because iPhones can take multiple days to fully set up with indexing and all that stuff, the iPhone 16 Pro feels like it got a battery boost compared to last year, and it's probably only about an hour-ish worse than my 15 Pro Max when I first got it, but better than my 15 Pro Max now after a year of usage with less than 90% battery health. It's kind of hard to remember the battery, but yeah, I would say it's about an hour better when it's fresh. So don't forget, it's gonna degrade, it's gonna age, it's gonna get worse the longer you use it. On the other hand, the iPhone 16 Pro Max, I'll just say plainly, has outstanding battery life. This might be the best iPhone I have ever used in terms of battery life. I was using this all day yesterday, listening to music, scrolling through TikTok, shooting with the camera, 4K, 120 frames per second, all of the above, right? And every time I went to check on the battery life, I was just like, wow, it actually has that much left? So yeah, the testing for these things seems legitimate enough, and the battery on the Pro Max is a big reason why I picked it to be my iPhone this year, even though I prefer the form factor and handling of the smaller iPhone 16 Pro. But at the end of the day, even though I prefer the form factor on this, the battery life on the big 6.9-inch Pro Max, it won me over. But that decision may be different for you. There's pros and cons for the iPhone 16 Pro and the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and while they have the same specs, cameras, and features, they feel like completely different phone experiences. So let me know, did you buy an iPhone 16 Pro or did you buy an iPhone 16 Pro Max? And if you didn't, which one would you choose? As always, I hope you liked the video, I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, leave me a like, sub for more, and I will catch you all in the next one.